So Tara, welcome to the Charley Law podcast. Everyone's thinking, hang on, new studio, new person, what's going on? And this is our timeout episode. So every 3 or 4 episodes, it used to be Ben, our producer. It didn't used to be, but Ben's taking a break for this timeout because I'm living now in South Africa, and Tara, we met in prison, actually, didn't we? We were actually
at a boxing tournament.
I was looking for some help with my social media, and I was Googling a few different agencies, and then literally the next day, I've got the agency logo that I was looking at on your hoodie sitting in front of me. So I tapped you on the shoulder, didn't I? And I was like, I like your vibe. So we've started working together, and you're helping me with my branding and social media and everything. And as we're here together in South Africa, and you've been deep diving into all of my stuff. And I think that you probably have a lot more access to other people and you sort of get what we're doing and why we're doing it. But still, you've got a lot of questions and you're trying to get to the bottom of it. So I thought, why don't we put you in the hot seat for this timeout episode, and you can ask me some questions, try and figure out, your own curiosities, but also we can link it to some of the more recent episodes as well, and kind of riff on personal development. So Tara, welcome.
Call it fate, Charlie. It's been a pleasure working with you and getting to know about you and getting to understand your why and how the Charley Law brand came about, and I'm curious about it all.
Okay, great. Well, without further ado, got your first question, Tara.
I'm quite a curious person, and getting to know and learn about you, we come from, in my opinion, 2 completely different worlds or countries in this case. I mean, you from the UK, I'm from South Africa, and I'm also a big fan of personal development, specifically in my own life. I think it's important to always challenge that next chapter, that next phase, to always grow and push boundaries. And I can't help but look at our different backgrounds and ask the question of how privilege might have been a factor in these transitions. And specifically speaking to your recent transition, in career, maybe in moving from the UK to SA, how has privilege played a role in your transition?
Great question to start off with, Tara. Clearly addressing the elephant in the room. It's your first rodeo in the podcast studio, but it doesn't feel like it. So I think that, look, firstly, privilege background, personal development space, that's unusual. Mostly we have people that have got the rags to riches story, and they had a real broken home and background, and they came through real adversity, and that inspires people. Their story almost gives them credibility behind what they're doing. But I think for me, I had a great childhood. I had a carefree childhood, and my family had resources, and I went to private school, and I rode horses, and we went on nice holidays and stuff. And I think that it's very easy if I mention, someone like me, if I dwell on like if I was ever unhappy or I wasn't satisfied or I was in a bit of a rut or I went through some adversity, everyone's like, who the hell are you to say these things, Charlie? How dare you? You're super privileged and you don't know what it's like to have real troubles and challenges. And so I think, to begin with, let's just address that. And I think, yes, a lot of these people have that very valid point. I don't know what it's like to experience real pain and difficulty and disaster and the depth of suicidal ideation, or being homeless and on the streets, or witnessing, the loss of a child or something like that, God forbid. Like, I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to is that, and this is what I've noticed through life, is that as long as people are above the poverty line and they have their certain, basic needs met, people create a sort of a default framework around them, what they're used to, a reference point. And for the most part, most people want to better themselves. From wherever they are, they want to get better. And oftentimes there are situations and peaks and troughs in people's lives where they're unhappy and something's happened, or they're in a rut, and they want to get back to where they were, and they can't get out of bed in the morning, or they don't know what they want to do, or they're panicking, or they're anxious, or have these certain expectations, and they're just confused and they feel shit. And I've seen very wealthy people who are unhappy. I've seen very wealthy families that are dysfunctional, and I've seen, to that adage, if you're not happy in the little one-bed studio, you're not going to be happy in the mansion. And so for me, happiness and completeness and peace in one's heart and being energized and motivated and wanting to better oneself, it cuts across the material for the most part. Okay, money solves money problems, but to have happiness, joy, peace in one's heart, feel content, all those good things we speak about, I truly believe that it cuts across background and resources and material possessions, as we've already spoken about. Moving on to what role does privilege play in my decision making to, I suppose, change career or make big decisions as I approach my late 30s, 40th year. I think that, and this is something that's not spoken about enough, is that actually on the one side, I do have some resources and fallback, and so taking risk is maybe a little bit easier, because if it all goes wrong, I can probably move back to England and go and live on the farm with my mum, right? Some people don't have that. But on the flip side, I actually think it makes being bold and being courageous and making big change and, being, radical about changing one's beliefs and approaches and what one's doing a lot harder, because one doesn't have the nothing to lose attitude, because I feel that I've got things to lose. I think if you've got nothing to lose, I think it's easier to kind of burn the bridges and burn the boats and go for it. But coming from a more sort of privileged private school, boarding school background, a lot of sort of middle to upper class families, they kind of care more about what everyone else thinks because of the sort of the level of their normality and social norms and expectations, and parents caring more about their kids going to the right schools, having the same right haircuts, having the right names, and having the right careers. I feel there's more expectation and judgment, and I suppose people can be accustomed to a certain life. Their kids can be going to the certain nursery. They can be going on certain holidays and hanging out with their friends from school and all of those things. That there are norms and expectations, and so to kind of like to reverse out of that or make bold decisions, to have the courage to take major risk, move out of that house, or take the kid out of the school, the private school, and put them in the state school, or move in with your parents for a little bit, or not be able to go into those holidays, or start doing something totally different that people are going to talk about you and maybe judge you. I really think it's actually harder in some ways, because you've got all of these social norms, expectations, judgments of being a certain way. And so I think sometimes it's actually harder to kind of unshackle all of those things that have kind of become this sort of inertia of making it harder to take that leap of faith.
And just touching on the point of personal development, it is a broad area, and I'm aware that you are trying to demystify this space. What's a myth at the moment in the personal development area that you are trying to debunk at the moment?
I mean, there's so much, Tara. I think I've got this long list on my iPhone on the notes. I've got debunking, or conflicting advice, I call it. And I've got loads of these, and you and I are, we're going to make more videos around these, but it takes time, it takes a lot of energy. But I think probably the one that comes to mind is actually meditation, because it's a good example of, like, it's not necessarily a myth, but it's something that's a little bit misunderstood. Meditation, I think there are so many people talking about meditation now, even breath work or different modalities of meditation. And I think that there's a sort of a lack of understanding around the depth and utility around something like meditation. And I think what I try and do is from the theory and the practical experience and the things that I've tried, I really try and synthesize things and simplify things so people really understand and they get it. And so I can communicate that to people and they can be like, okay, that makes sense. The juice is worth a squeeze. It's not so mumbo jumbo. So take meditation, for example. I think a lot of people even get confused with what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation. And so mindfulness, one could describe it as an awareness of what is. It's acknowledging an awareness of what is. If you're aware of one's breath, or you're aware of your moment to moment awareness of what you can see, what you can feel, what you can touch. That's mindfulness, okay? And so to give an example, if you're focusing on your breath, trying to focus on the present moment, it's that moment to moment awareness that you're experiencing when you are fully focused on your breath, okay? And so then what's meditation? Meditation, and I think this is probably one of the most misunderstood aspects, is that meditation actually means practice. Meditation is a practice, and it's the practice of moving your attention from one thing to another. And that's all meditation is. And so, yes, meditation can be sitting in a chair with your eyes closed at 5 a.m. in the morning and moving your attention onto your breath, or counting from 1 to 10, or a mantra or a sound. But equally well, it can be playing a sport and hitting a ball. It can be stroking an animal. It can be in the shower and noticing the water touching your skin and cascading down your body, because you're moving your attention from wherever it was subconsciously, the internal chatter, to no, I'm putting my attention here, walking through a forest and actually being mindful of looking at the trees and experiencing those sounds. That is meditation. It's moving your attention from one place to another, and it's being deliberate about that. And if you think about making change, what is making change? Making change is doing something different, thinking something different, feeling something different, or taking a different action, or saying something different. And so it's what we were talking about at the beginning. It's that critical, it's the epicenter of change. If you can kind of hijack that bit between stimulus and response, if you can think something different or do something different compared to how you used to do it, that's making change. And so if you think of meditation is deliberately and intentionally putting your attention from over here to over here, thinking and feeling something different, then that's kind of the crux of change. Then meditation is the crux of change, because you're training your body, your mind, your emotions to react differently, and you're training yourself. So, there are 3 levels of meditation that I like to synthesize. And the first level is that mindfulness meditation. It's getting into the present moment, using your breath or a mantra. And that's a great way of training and practicing, moving your attention from over here to over there. And that can have calming, de-stressing, de-anxiety, reducing de-anxiety. I'm not sure that's even a word, but reducing anxiety kind of outcomes, right? And so, that's level 1. And even even that on its own can be hugely powerful. A lot of people think that's just meditation on its own. It's trying to be present, and it's getting you into a calmer state, right? You know, people at work, they might get anxious, they go and sit on the loo and get onto the Calm app and try and calm down. But crucially, that is crucially important, because the practice every day of getting better, of moving your attention from over there to here on the present moment, on your breath or whatever it is, your mantra, that practice of being the witness of your thoughts and being more objective to your thoughts and feelings. When you're going about your day and you're trying to sort of stop being a certain way, or being less negative and more positive, being less controlling and, more feminine and light and having fun, or, being less pleasing and being more unreasonable and bold and strong and owning it, it's the same thing. It's moving your attention and your energy from being like that to being like that. So that's training that muscle of being deliberate about everything that you do. So that's level 1. And that gets you into a certain state to begin with. And then level 2, once you're in that state and hopefully you're moving more out of your head into your body and feel and emotion and into that subconscious, that's when we can start to practice more active or dynamic meditation, which is where we can start to try and cultivate and manifest and foster different emotions within us. And so if we're trying to become more of something or become less of something, we can try and foster gratitude within us. So, to try and dissolve the, nothing's ever enough and always have to make progress and I'm not that happy. Like, okay, let's foster gratitude inside of us. Or if those insecurities, you don't think you're good enough, we can foster self-love and self-compassion. If you've got something going on in your life where someone wronged you, you can try and develop compassion and forgiveness for that person and try and gain perspective and understand that it's not really you, it's not, maybe it's more them or however that whatever the context of that situation is. So that's level 2, where you can really develop, and it can take time, we're talking months here, but over and, repetitively trying to cultivate those emotions within us, that can start to change our state. And again, you don't just have to do that for 10, 15 minutes in the morning. Meditation can equally well be an alarm or a prompt on your phone 6 times during the day, when it just reminds you to be more cheeky, right? Just be more cheeky. So one's not so heavy and taking oneself so seriously. And, what's going to change your state more? Doing a 5-minute or 10-minute meditation in the morning when you go, oh, I'm going to be more feminine and more cheeky. Maybe you're going through a point in your life where, you want to find a husband or find a boyfriend, but you've got a lot going on at work and you want to try and remind yourself and cultivate that more feminine, cheeky, fun, outgoing version of you rather than the controlling, focused, stressed, tense person. What's going to be more effective? Doing 5-10 minutes in the morning trying to cultivate that, or when you're out in the day, out at the sharp end of life, reminding yourself in those situations where you can quite easily forget. So that's level 2, dynamic active meditation, where you can actually change the way that you are. And then the third level is it's really that opportunity to dial into the second brain, I like to call it, the gut, your intuition and your heart, to kind of help you make big decisions in your life. So when you're in this state, hopefully you've sort of sunk into your body more, you're out of your head and you're feeling calm. It's a great opportunity to kind of ask oneself searching questions. It might be something smaller decisions that are going on in your everyday life, or, how am I going to react to that person, or what, how am I going to deal with this thing? Or it could be big life decisions like, what am I going to do? What do I want? Is this the right person for me? And quietly, and I often do this at the very end of my meditation, if there are any big questions, I ask myself those questions, and I sit and I feel it. I go through, what does my heart tell me, and what does my gut and my intuition tell me? And you imagine different circumstances. You imagine kind of saying yes to something and what that would look like, waking up in the morning and doing that, or being around that. Or saying no to that and doing something else, and imagining it and seeing how it makes you feel, and just sitting there quietly using those senses is incredibly powerful. And so, those are the three levels of meditation. Mindfulness meditation, level 1, being present, practicing deliberately moving your attention from over here to over there. Level 2 is active dynamic meditation, cultivating different sort of thoughts and feelings within you. And then level 3 is tapping into your gut and helping one inform better decisions. So everything I've just said about meditation, I think is a great example. Although I went on a little bit and I could have synthesized it a little bit, hopefully anyone listening can see like, okay, hang on, I kind of get that a little bit more. I understand why one would do it and how it can help and why it's worth doing. But even let's zoom back out of that and like, why should we even bother? And it goes back to that quote. I can't remember who it's by. It's either Naval Ravikant or Tony Robbins, where they say, life's not about conditions, it's about decisions. And I always go back to that when I'm thinking like, what's the point? Why are we doing all this personal development? I was like, hang on a second. Life is all about making better decisions, because if you make better decisions, you get better outcomes, and you can start creating that upward spiral. I made a lot of bad decisions, and I was, slightly going back to your earlier point, part of my makeup, I was very insecure. I was very entitled. I was a bit of a perfectionist as well, but I also believed in myself and I had a lot of courage. So that mixture of things got me into a lot of bother, thinking I knew best, running before I could walk, taking too much risk, not doing things properly, taking shortcuts, working with the wrong people. And I made so many bad decisions. And that had a major impact on my life, and it created this sort of downward spiral. And it has literally taken, Tara, a good 5, 6, 7, 8 years of kind of like bottoming out and getting out of some of those situations or relationships or going broke to kind of start turning the ship around. Because if you compound a lot of wrong decisions, it's very hard to slow that down and turn the ship around and start trying to make better decisions. And slowly but surely, that those compound and you build on it, and then you start going in a better direction. And so coming back to that, life's not about conditions, it's about decisions. It's all about making right decisions, whether it's the big decisions or the micro decisions. And that goes back to meditation, because meditation is that piece in between stimulus and response. And that's all we are. We're just stimulus and response machines making, loads of decisions all the time during the day. And I think so if one can have that create that self-awareness, understand where one wants to go, and start being more intentional and deliberate about how they want to be and where they want to go, then meditation is one of the greatest tools to be able to do that. And it doesn't have to be doing it like that bloke does it or she does it. It's how you want to do it, I think that's quite powerful. And that's a good example of demystifying the mumbo jumbo.
Do you see any trends in the personal development space at the moment or perhaps in the future?
I think that one of the main things I've noticed is each person in their different lane, they're pushing their thing. The fitness people are pushing their thing. The nutrition people are pushing their thing. The coaches are pushing their thing. The psychologists are pushing their thing. The hypnotherapists are pushing their thing. And I think what is needed big time in the market is actually a bit more education and context for people around a truly holistic approach. People talk about holistic a lot, but what's a truly holistic approach? It's actually looking at all the different pieces of the puzzle. It's like, okay, why are we doing this? Normally there's someone that isn't happy with something. They want to make change. They want to improve their life. They're going through something. They're not feeling how they want to feel. So they want to make change. And so, they might get introduced to the meditation person or the psychedelics person or the coach or the fitness person. And that's fine. They're pushing their thing. But that person is like, where do I start? What book do I read? Here, there, everywhere. And I think one of the biggest pieces of value that I can bring to people is by opening their eyes to all the different pieces of the puzzle and the best sequence to do it in. Because there is absolutely no way or no point in getting a coach, trying to get clear on what you want to do if you are tormented by emotional and psychological issues, and you have this huge ego, or you're fatigued and stressed from stuff that happened in the past, because you need to go and sort that out first. And equally well, there's not really much point in going and seeing a psychologist or figuring out the inner workings of your mind if, hang on, you haven't sorted your physical body and your health out, and you're dehydrated, there's not enough oxygen pumping around your blood, you're constantly fatigued because you're intolerant to some kind of food, or your glucose insulin levels are off balance. It's like body health, physical first, mental second. And so there's so much around sequencing to those different stepping stones to actually making change. And then I think finally it's like, how can I try and like do things differently? I'm basically the city boy, the iron ore trader who was a certain way, had a certain life. It all went wrong. I got a deep dive into self-development, changed my life forever. And rather than just sit there and preach about it and tell everyone else how to do it, I'm kind of getting back out there, utilizing what I've learned and giving people that context, because I think context and relatability is everything. And that's why my book isn't a how-to. It's a story with insights, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't work, and this is how I approached this, and this is the truth about what I really thought in this instance. And that's why on the podcast we get people in to talk about their journey of change, because everyone's different, and like how and how long and why and what worked and what didn't, because people can relate to those stories. Those things can spark change, or they can spark interest and curiosity, and be like, oh, if that professional sportsman's into mindset and psychology and spirituality, maybe I will too. And so I think that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I'm noticing in your journey of change, there's this term. One of my favorite digital writers, his name's Dan Coe, and he mentions that you should become a multi-dimensional human being. And in your journey of change, I'm noticing that you're now wearing this hat of an entrepreneur, a dad, a content creator, a self-development coach, and it's admirable to be doing all of that, on a daily basis. And what's one habit that you focus on daily that allows you to balance, being all of those things, showing up in this world as a dad, as an entrepreneur, as a content creator and self-development coach? What's the one thing that allows you to just balance all of that out?
I think it's clarity. And I know it sounds cheesy and I make it sound easy, but it's taken me years to actually get really, really clear on what's important, what I want to do, and where I want to go. I think it's Oprah that said it. Like, I think she was asked by someone, like, what's the secret to, everyone that she's interviewed ever, like, what's the secret to success? And she said, the most important thing is first knowing what you want or where you want to go. Like, a lot of people don't have that, or don't know that, and have it really locked down. And I think I've had this sort of, when I was younger, I was this kind of unguided missile with all this belief and I suppose entrepreneurial energy. And I've told you, that fueled me, but I kind of like went a bit astray and made lots of wrong decisions. But I do have this belief, and this is why I'm so keen on the adage of not settling and keeping going and so getting that clarity of what one really wants, that I think has been the biggest key, because when you get clarity, you can start thinking super long term and you can get very strategic. So I start thinking in decades now. Sure, things can change, the world can change very quickly, but I think it's important to have strong opinions loosely held. So, you can have a North Star, you can have a vision, you can see where the big components of your life want to be. And what I like to do, and what we teach and talk about in my course is finding that vision of the future. So far in the future, you're not worrying about how you're going to get there, the practicalities, whether it's possible. 10 years from now, virtually anything's possible. And then you sort of extrapolate back and think, right, what are the strategic steps over the 10 years? What do I have to do, etc. And then you sort of break that down to the, okay, what are my 1-year goals? And then what are my habits and what are my priorities? And I think that to have that clarity and have that perspective, it allows me to be ruthless about where I spend my time and energy. Because, we've spoken about this already. In this day and age, it is crazy the amount of options, invitations, distractions. And that goes to the privilege point as well, having lots of great friends and invitations and resources to go and do things. It would be so easy to say yes to all of those things. But that clarity and conviction around what's important and what you want allows me to be ruthless about saying no, guarding my time, and then my sort of early morning to kind of get clear around how I'm going to break the day up, how am I going to prioritize it. And when gets a little bit like, gosh, I'm feeling a bit like this, or we're not making enough progress, or I feel I'm missing out here, I'm like, let's just remember what the plan is, get perspective, how far we've come, where we're going, and let's remind ourselves how deep we went to know that this is really where we want to go. And that helps you get conviction. And I think sometimes the missing out thing, sometimes you might pop up and go do a social thing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this just reminded me why
you're not doing that.
Why you're not doing that, and why you prefer like sticking to the lane.
Going back to the last 2 guests on your podcast, I remember you mentioning that you were going to interview Billy McFarlane, and I was like, who is this guy? And you're like, oh, he was the co-founder or founder of the Fire Festival. And the first thought that popped up was, why? And how did you even find, or where was the desire around wanting to interview him? Where do you find the inspiration in looking for your guests? Like, how does this all unfold for you? It's because to me it was a little bit off from personal development, in my opinion. I was like, Billy, the guy who went to prison, and you thought he was suited for your podcast. So how did that come about?
Well, I think first of all, it was the realization that I'd like to get the highest profile people possible on my podcast, because, rule number 1 is interview people that people want to listen to. And it helps to have people on that people know and they know about, and so they're intrigued to listen to them. So I think, number 1, I was keen to get people on that had a bigger profile, grow the numbers, etc. And secondly, the crux of the podcast, the theme is making change. How do people develop? How do they transform? How do they go through adversity? Whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, career, whatever, right? And Billy McFarlane was someone everyone knew. He's obviously a bit of an idiot and a dick and deluded, goes to jail, and he's come out. And I started, I was following him on Instagram a little bit, and I just started noticing things and traits about how he conducted himself. And I sensed that, hang on, I think there's someone here who's gone through an awful lot of change. and he's obviously been through, a serious shock. He's obviously starting to demonstrate some humility. And I could kind of relate, although I never went to prison, I can relate making big mistakes, being, super scared, losing everything, and kind of going down a rabbit hole and getting into all this stuff that ultimately informed a massive change in me. And I was like, well, Billy, I really want to get you on the podcast to dig into what he'd actually did, how it helped him, what worked, what didn't, and to understand whether he really has made some change, because I think people are curious about that.
And then we look at Esteban, who is the complete opposite to Billy. I mean, he's a world-renowned fashion designer, and there's such a contrast in industry. And how did that come about again?
Well, I think it goes to the point earlier about personal development space. I don't want to be so prescribed about it. I don't want to be like, oh, let's try and get so-and-so from the personal development space because they've got, 1 million followers and maybe I can leverage off their audience. Like, sure, it helps to get higher profile people on. I don't want to deny that, but I want to interview people that I'm kind of organically think, oh, I'd like to speak to that person. I'm curious about that person. And even Violet Manners, who I got on the podcast, like, it was almost, I got lucky almost with her because I didn't realize that she went through as much of a major change and sort of deep dive and transformation that she did, even like pretty recently, considering when I interviewed her. But it was because I just suspected by the way things that they were saying or conducting themselves. And I'm like, I kind of want to interview that person. And I was seeing some of Esteban's stuff, and I'd actually reached out to him a few times because I thought he'd be a great person to get onto the podcast because, he is the opposite to some like a me or a Billy McFarlane who kind of like was a certain way, made mistakes, got into all this stuff, realized how good it was, and then started practicing it. Where Esteban comes from, like that very liberal, creative family, artistic, and he was growing up doing meditation and self-expression and kind of like everything that a lot of people are learning and getting into now through need. He was kind of practicing anyway, and has always embodied a lot of these things that we talk about into just the way that he conducts himself anywhere in life. Gratitude. He's not doing a gratitude journal or practice in the morning. He just tries to incorporate that in his moment to moment awareness of life, and I think that's beautiful. And I think that it's just the way he is. He's a real creative. He's very gentle and expressive and articulate. And I think it's just a great perspective, and other people will be able to relate to that. And he's going through transition as well, which I didn't even know about, in similar age to me. And, the previous business and brand is kind of being wound up, and he's transitioning to a new project, a new brand, a new direction. And that's great. And people could relate to that as well. So I think that's the beauty of it. It is multidimensional. I think that sets us apart from a lot of what other people are doing.
The more I dive into the guests you've been interviewing over the past few years and the evolution of your podcast and the Charley Law brand, it's interesting to see the different industries you're going into and the different channels you're branching into. And I think my question is, it's always, where do you see this podcast in a few years from now? How do you see that growth unfolding?
I think that because I've made the decision not to just be the personal development guy and go to those same meetups in America or interview all the other guys and girls in the industry and kind of be in that silo of self-development, because I've made the decision to go back into business, into natural resources, doing stuff in Africa. I think that by me being out there, out and about, doing other interesting things, it'll put me in environments and situations with a lot more diverse and variety of interesting people, whether they're politicians, whether they're businessmen, whether they're artists, internationally. And I think by getting some of these people onto the podcast that are, slightly more unusual or different, even relatable, compared to the guy that's just released his book and he's going around doing the rounds on everyone else's podcast, And I think so, to create that kind of point of difference, and where do we want to be in a couple of years' time? I think having business leaders, political leaders, sports pros from all different industries on the podcast, opening up about their journey through adversity, what worked and what didn't. And that's limitless. And I'm still learning from people. I still get inspired by people. We go through peaks and troughs in life of, being great at, sticking to routines and this and that and the other. But then sometimes you get inspired, like, oh shit, yeah, actually, I really should go and sort that out or get back into that practice, because it's the relatability and it sparks motivation.
And I'm sure you're also really excited about the online community that you're gonna build along the way, and helping these people who have might have been in a similar position as yourself, where you wanted to make change but you just didn't know how. And I suppose having easy access to that knowledge and wisdom that you're sharing it's helpful.
Look, I mean, that's the ultimate goal in all of this, Tara. Sometimes it's very easy in our conversations around social media. It's quite easy to start thinking about, there's not enough people listening or watching, or why are we even bothering? But to be honest, I was thinking about that a little bit with this podcast. Like last night, I was talking to Nicole and I was like, do you know what? I'm kind of feeling a little bit like, who the hell's going to listen to this? Why should anyone care what I've got to say? And I'm going to do this, the timeout episode with Tara, and I should be more excited about it. And I'm like, why am I doing it? And who's going to listen? And who am I to talk about this stuff, right? And then we spoke through it a little bit more, and Nicole and I came to the conclusion that, hang on a second, no, let's just go back to the why. And let's go back to those people who have got in touch with me and messaged me and been so grateful, and how much conversations have helped, and some of the people who've done the pilot of my course who've been like, wow, and this has been a game changer, and thank you so much. Like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have done that. And it goes back to the why of, why am I doing all of this? It's because everything that I've done has been such a game changer. And I can see in people around me and friends and acquaintances that there are things holding people back, and they're not where they want to be, or they've got certain things that are happening in their lives. And I can share what I've done in my own way, in my own context. And if I can help them have a slightly better life experience and get to where they want to be, then that's exciting. And by the time we'd finished the conversation, I was like, oh, I'm really excited for this conversation, because I'm just going to want to talk as if it's, first of all, just you and me in the room and kind of forget about the cameras, but also because I want George and Harry and Jamie and, Sarah, imagine they're sitting over there, and I'm talking these things to them because I know how much it can help them. I've seen firsthand, what a game changer it all is.
Yeah, and to touch on your point around self-awareness, it was an interesting space for me, because I was kind of asking myself this question of, who do I want to show up in this world as, and I was sitting on many spectrums, like one being I want to help people, but at the same time I want to make money. And then another aspect was I want to be successful, but then it was like, okay, but how do I help people still make a lot of money and be successful? To only learn that to make money, you have to maybe be an aggressive salesman. And I was like, okay, I'm not
No, but that's to the point perfectly. Like, you know, you're maybe getting that advice or that opinion from someone that they only know that way. But, you know, actually there's a whole other way. There's a different way. There's a more progressive way. There's a more compassionate way. And, you know, God forbid you listen to that person, and that's the only way. And you're living your whole life not in line with your, you know, your essence. And as cheesy as that sounds, you know, it doesn't have to be. And, you know, the Ikigai experiment, isn't it? You know, what do you love? What are you great at? What does the world need? And what can you be paid for? And digging into that. And if you find your sweet spot, it's one of the most powerful things.
Yeah. And I think it's important that a lot of people keep pursuing that, because in my opinion, the worst progression could be just working in a job that you hate, because then you just walk around talking to people who aren't really happy about life, who aren't really happy with where they're at. And like you said, it's getting back to that self-awareness and wanting to make that change, because it's I feel like it's, like you said, it's the lack of self-awareness that leads you down the course that you don't really want to pursue, but you're doing it because you know you have to, but you don't want to.
But that's to the earlier point, Tara, and even expectations and privilege and social norms. You know, there are a lot of people that stuck where they are with a certain people in a certain situation, in a job, or, you know, life has just caught up with them, and life is so busy. You know, life happens to you. It's really hard to sort of say no to it all and carve out time to really get clear and make change and make big decisions. And let's not forget that there's a lot of people out there that are very happy. They're not interested in making change. And, you know, that's fine. Like, we're not about preaching to those people. We're about telling stories, inspiring people. And if they want to make change, they can listen to our stuff and read my book and do my course and understand the different options that are out there. But a lot of people are stuck in these kind of situations that really, you know, deep down, they feel that they're not satisfied and they do want to break free. But because of the construct of life, it's very, very, very difficult to break out of that, especially as you get into, you know, late 20s, 30s, 40s. Like, it's hard. There's expectations. There's the way that their life has been set up and responsibilities. And so I think to the original point around privilege and comfort and expectations, like, it is really hard to break away from that. But I think it's a good place to finish, and just to remind people, don't settle, keep going. And, you know, we all want to better ourselves in some sort of way. So thanks for the Time Out episode.
Thanks
Tara.
for having me, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
You're a natural. And looking forward to continuing to work with you. If you enjoyed the episode, please share the love and give us a cheeky follow, rating, like, or review. It really does make a massive difference. Don't be shy either to share any of your favorites on social media. This is a truly mission-driven project with the aim of helping to motivate, inspire, and give hope to as many people as possible that change, a better life, a new dawn is all possible. I genuinely love hearing from you and actively try to constantly improve things and bring guests on to address any specific themes. As always, you'll find resources and links from the episode in the show notes. You can follow me on all social media platforms as well as YouTube. And don't forget to check out my website, charleylaw.com. Until next time.